Hello and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach Insider. My name is Ben,
And I'm Swiz.
and thank you for joining us for the North Melbourne, the Baby Blues, coming out straight off the bottom of the ladder with some awesome picks and some awesome talent in their books. Swiz, thanks for having me, or for you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'll have you, Benny. Yeah, no, welcome to the podcast, Ben. Appreciate you being here, mate.
A bit of role reversal. It is soon to be the first. Before we move on, social media, SC Insider 100 on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. Also, you can find us on all the audio platforms as well. Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, pretty much we're everywhere. You name it, we are there. And also on the YouTube. Find us, Supercoach Insider. Like, subscribe, hit those 1,000 subs, and get those comments going, guys. We love the comments.
Yeah,
I love the comments.
A lot of talk on Twitter today with the boys and that out there. So, yeah,
yes.
We had a bit of a chat about the weekend, and obviously that's changed a few people's opinions on certain players. But
definitely.
We'll keep that for another pod and get into the Roo boys, mate.
Yep, and it was also on the George podcast as well. I just so it was the YouTube, should I say, and YouTube channel. So I also shared that on Twitter as well. Otherwise, look for George. I might actually try and share it through our profile as well on YouTube. Here I was very lively. I had a few beers, and I quite like draft leagues, and I made the first rookie mistake ever. 6 teams though, and I was picked 2. So I'm sitting there like, oh yeah, like chat, because there's a lot of YouTubers there. And I forget, because you normally when you play leagues, it's sort of 10 or 12 and you have a little bit of time. It was 1 minute to pick your team. And literally I'd get it and I'd be like chatting away. And then for the first time ever, I think I actually missed my pick and I ended up with Cunnington. I was like, what the hell? Like, how amateurish am I? So they're like, right. SC Insider's on. Chat to him, boys. Chat to him. Wind him up and then watch him. And a couple of times I'm like, 14 seconds. Like, quick. I need a player. So yeah. There we go. And
don't worry. You're not alone there, mate. One of my mates, Doggy, did that yesterday in our keeper league. So
what was his name?
It's Doggy, Shane Doig. So yeah, Doggy. We'll give you a good old Doig. Well done, mate. In a keeper league as well. Cunners, that's going to serve you some good, mate.
Oh, Jesus. Well, listen, in a keeper league, you can have probably a little bit of redemption at the future time. So anyway, that's it. Normally I'm really well prepared for draft leagues too, but for that one, I was kind of let me try and print out my spreadsheets just beforehand, and then found some errors, which I might have given Jock Reynolds' voice a little bit of I was like, hang on, this guy's not a forward as for trying to pick players. So, but do appreciate the work they put out. North Melbourne. Now, let's face it, that first 3 minutes is probably more interesting than what we're about to tell you. So, the good news for North Melbourne is that you could be top of the table after 2 rounds because you play 2 basket cases straight off the bat, and you have a chance of winning if you decide to pull your finger out. So it's
well, settle down there, Benny boy. Settle down. Hawthorn are just in the rebuild. You've got to give them some credit. Premiership coming down from that new coach. Wouldn't call them a basket case. The round 2 opponent, they're a fucking shithouse, but I'm making it my mission every podcast. So to the Fremantle supporters, if you got any Fremantle mates out there, get them to tune in this podcast because I'm ripping on West Coast every fucking week here.
Right. Well, I'll look forward to the West Coast podcast coming out probably tomorrow or the day after when you're on the line. Yeah, interesting. No, I do agree, but Hawks were very disappointing in that trial game to start. I think they do have a lot of potential. I think Gunston coming back in does help. And, a few of the midfielders, and they do have a lot of talent coming through from the VFL that does actually complement them. But, let's face it, North Melbourne could definitely win this game. And against the Eagles as well at home, definitely within reach. I think the Eagles are literally hurt and wounded. Apart from that, though, let's face it, I think North Melbourne are still definitely going to be rebuilding, which means that we probably are going to be looking at the rookies more than anything, Swiz. But let's start off with the premiums, shall we?
There's
what do you
premiums?
Reckon? Yeah, I believe there's premiums. Now, there's not many, right? Basically, I'm going to let you talk about the first one. Get it over and done with.
There's a first one.
Get it over and done with. Aaron Hall, 572,000. Everyone knows I'm not a fan of Aaron Hall. I wasn't going to pick Aaron Hall. I was doubling down on not picking Aaron Hall. And he got injured. So now everyone's like, oh, well, we can't pick Aaron Hall. And I was like, well, I wish you would have had him for 2 weeks and then felt the pain I felt all last year. Swiz, missing, looks like he's out for round 1 at this point in time. Did a hamstring. Are you keen as an upgrade option? Are you thinking he's going 122 again, or are you a bit concerned?
Till last week, I was so big on Aaron Hall, and if you listen to like Grimo, especially on Twitter, couldn't like he'd have Hall as his number one pick player. Loves the guy. Love what he did last year, and a lot of it last year was because there'd be a kick, so many kicks into North Melbourne's backline. Zeeble marks. Hall calls for the ball. Hall could be standing next to a player, calls for the ball. And then Hall gets it, gives it straight off to someone, calls for it back, kicks it to someone who butchers it, and then it's repeat. So he was getting so much ball. But I jumped off him about a week ago, just before his injury, because the talk that McDonald was going back into the back line, Zeebel's still very much there, and they were sort of trying to change some stuff up coming into the season. So the unfortunate thing, because there would have been 15% on him at the time, that he did the hammy, and I thought he could have actually started to turn into a bit of a burn man. Like we know that apart from the injury history, but I think some of those other guys were going to take some of those points off him, which is a bit of a shame. So no, I'm not really looking for him at the moment. However, you just never know. Like come mid-season, and if McDonald goes down or Zeeble goes down or something like that, yeah, then that might be the time to jump back on him, and hopefully he's dropped a lot in price by then.
Can you believe I have him in our keeper league, Swiz? Look, I was big on him, and I think I had him in 2 drafts. I got him nice and early last year. I was like, right, he's playing a good role, but I just didn't pick him in standard. So that's why I don't have any love for him. And a hamstring, perfect old man injury. Did go 110 for the middle 8 rounds and 122 for the last 7. So that's where the appeal comes from. I just think as well that North the coach came in basically after the trading period, I think it was. North selected a coach quite late. So he would have had probably less time to come up with a game plan and do a whole bunch of stuff like that. So I think it was a work in progress. And then now I feel like they need to actually develop some of this youth. You can't just have some of these old guys just racking up ball for the sake of it. I think you actually need to start learning and start having an actual game plan that doesn't revolve around, turning it over and just rewarding the old guys with 1-2s.
Well, I think there was the other pit that a lot of people missed last year, but because of their young recruits, young Phillips was brought in and Tommy Powell. So you've got a little bit of youth in that midfield that meant North were going to see a lot of ball down defence. So they wanted experienced heads back there just to settle down the ship, help out the young guys. Now that those guys have got an extra year under the belt and they've brought in Greenwood to help out that midfield, now they can work on the defenders. And that's where I think Josh Goda will come in and McDonald goes back. And you'll see probably just one of those guys in Zeeble as the leadership role, and they'll have a bit more of a younger defence now that they'll develop. And those pieces will come together.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. So that's that one there. So the next one I'm going to go straight to Jai Simpkin. A little bit of value there, 529k midfielder, 97.2 average. He was actually really exceptional in the first half of, 2021? And with Cunnington pretty much being out at this point in time, for me, I think it's Jai Simpkins midfield. Now, I know some people are saying, Greenwood's coming in, etc., but I think Greenwood is still capped at what he can do. And Jai Simpkin, I think, could kind of come into and being kind of like a little mini Took or a mini Parish, where like he's the brunt sort of midfielder that spends a lot of his time in there getting the ball. So I'm pretty keen on him for draft leagues, particularly. I'm not going there in standard, but I think there's a lot more upside than a 97.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely value there. But I was, especially as you said, in the draft leagues, I would have been a lot more excited about this guy before Greenwood came in. I think Greenwood, normally you'd go, well, Greenwood's a big body, it helps to support. But North have a lot of those sort of midfielders in there. Now we know Cunners is going to be missing a lot of footy, and Jed Anderson, we don't know exactly what's going on with his vaccination
Who are
status.
the big bodies then? Who are the big bodies?
But, well, you still got LDU playing
Not
in
that
there
big.
as a midfield. You're saying not as big?
Not that big.
Not that big?
No.
All right, that's fine. In
Not that big.
your
Taron Thomas,
yeah,
not that big.
Taron Thomas isn't that big, but he
No.
definitely runs through there.
Powell, not that big.
Do you think?
Will Phillips, not that
Well,
big.
I'm not going to mention Pollock on this fucking draft, but this fucking
Pollock,
podcast, but
oh my God, is he even around?
he's still there. He's actually still there. I
He's
heard
just
somebody took him in a draft league. It was pretty funny.
He reminds
Well,
me of
yeah,
like a
okay,
single
so-
mom that cashes
Yeah.
cashes their paycheck each week, saying yes, please, thank you.
Yeah, but it's just the amount of players they got made, and that in that midfield. So, like Simpkins got to be their number one guy, but there's so many of them, and I just don't. With Greenwood
He's
coming in,
the
I just think it
only
takes more
one.
run. Yeah.
He's the
But
only
what
one that
happens?
could push 105
What
to
happens if?
110. The only one.
But what happens if Anderson gets his jab and Cunners comes back? Like
Well,
how many?
Anderson's like a forward mid, isn't he? Anderson
Yeah,
and
he's
Anderson
listed
won't
as a
even be
forward mid,
back.
but
He
surely
won't even
he'd
be
go in there
back
if he
for a
did. Well,
while.
he
He
probably
literally
doesn't.
just got back to the club, and they're saying he's got so much work to do. He'll be playing in like VFL basically until he gets match fitness. He's had no preseason much at all. I think he probably actually accepted the fact that maybe he wasn't going to play. You know what I mean? Like there was a whole range of stuff, but basically, word is he came back and he is underdone, and he will be spending time in the VFL. So I think he's a while away. I think Powell and Phillips have actually quite a lot to go for them. So when you look at keeper leagues, Powell is definitely going early in keeper leagues. I don't even mind him even in a draft leagues at this point in time as a mid forward Swiz. I don't know if you rate him enough to possibly scrape like with an 80 this
Oh,
year.
yeah, possibly in the draft. I don't know if it's going to be 80 again. My
Yeah,
problem with
but
North
like
is
within
just,
reach. If
yeah,
you
well, from net reach and
if you're in a
that, but
14 league, I don't mind him on
yeah,
like a
it depends how
bench
deep you're
option.
kind of. Oh, well, if he's there at the right time, I'd probably take him. But again, I just
Yep.
think there's like, who is their starting three midfielders? You're thinking that bounce? Simpkin, Greenwood,
Probably
and they're going what
an
Davies,
LDU and
Uniacke?
LDU, well, they'll probably rotate, and then they might have Simkin, Greenwood, and then maybe they might even have a Taron Thomas kind of go, or some point of difference, or they might just
Yeah,
go those three in there, and then try and mix in, your Powells and your maybe
and then
Powell,
Phillips.
LDU, Taron Thomas, Phillips probably get in there a little bit. That makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah,
They'll
but
probably mix a
that's
couple of
my
those older heads.
that's my worry. But like, and even though he's more wing, that Jaden Stephenson played some time in there. I just feel like they've got a lot of sort of guys, going to be running around in that mix at the moment, and I'm just a little worried about selecting them because week to week basis, you don't actually know who's going to freaking start in there.
Why are we arguing so much about
I don't
possible
know, mate.
draft players, Swizz? We're
Yeah,
talking
that's
about,
right.
like Jai Simpkins good for draft, and you're trying to shit on my boat that he can't go
I am trying to fucking
105
shit on your boat.
because I
Yeah.
have a whole bunch of shitty, possibly good, talented players. I don't know why shitty and good, talented come in the same
No,
sentence, but
I'm happy to talk up Taron Thomas. I think the kid's a jet.
well, let's move on to that. Can we move on
Yeah,
to
let's
Taron
do it.
Thomas and go with a 459k forward mid? Hyped up Taron Thomas. I've got him in a keeper league as well. Scraps that no one wanted. Averaged 105 for his last 6 rounds, 84 for the season. So people see that as bargain price. It's kind of the Jordan Ngoe of North Melbourne. Taron Thomas, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen. Swizz, what are your thoughts? Go, run with it.
Well, I think you've covered that. He was his finish to the year, and it's very, very DeGoey, Shy Bolton kind of player. Coming into his fourth season, 47 games. It's just that prime that we always talk about. That they hit those 50 games, and they just feel like they start to belong. So
I
yeah,
thought
I get what you're saying about Simpkin, but I think there's more value there with Taron Thomas. And the great thing about him is he's already got the dual position.
it was a bit ironic. His finish to the season was strong, and yet North Melbourne have finished. So I thought it was a little bit ironic. His performances at the back end
Don't
of
you
the year,
think?
but yeah, a little bit. Right. So I don't mind him draft leagues as well. I see people jumping on so early. It's the preseason hype game. Taron
Mm.
Thomas had a few good games. Looks like he's doing really well in the preseason, and sometimes these hype ones really work out. Again, draft league yesterday, Butters went pick 12. I think it was the Supercoach one was on tonight, and JB was saying that someone pipped Butters from him. So I don't know how early that was going, but looks like Butters is definitely any draft league coming up in the next sort of 10 days. I think Butters is going super early, like above a lot of other players, which is kind of ridiculous. So we'll see, I guess, on
Taron
that one.
Thomas is in 9% of teams, mate.
Yeah. Again, it's the value train this year in the forward line. We spoke, I think, a couple of years ago, and we're like, oh, like, no, you pay for the premiums, and then next minute, all these mid prices, your Greenwoods and your Brayshaws that were forward, start to go 90 to 100 or 100 odd. Could be one of those years again, to be honest, where,
Could be.
the
But
forward line is definitely open.
the guys that you've mentioned, Butters and Heaney, around that same price, I'd much rather. And I'd probably rather Shy Bolton, to be completely honest.
Oh, I think I'd rather Taron Thomas over Bolton because
Yeah, true. I
Bolton's a
probably do.
fucking devil.
I do rate Taron Thomas. I was just throwing in a Richmond player just so I could get into the conversation
And
there.
Bolton, of all the people you could lure me with.
Right.
So there you go. But even then, what is he? Nearly 460 for 40 more K. I'd rather Dusty Martin. At least you know what you're getting. I think Dusty goes 100, like, based on what I saw from his trial game. Like,
Mate, I
would
love the
you?
fact that we've turned the North Melbourne podcast into the Richmond podcast. It might be because I've got my Richmond shirt on. Um, so yeah, no, I'd much rather.
Oh, we're talking
Yeah,
price points. It's
yeah,
okay.
we are price
And
points. That's fine. Yeah,
we
no,
need to
no,
get listeners somehow, Swizz. We've got to talk about other teams with the North Melbourne podcast.
except for
But
the North Melbourne one. Oh, poor North Melbourne. Yeah, no, I'd
right.
rather
So
Dusty over Thomas.
Luke McDonald in draft leagues, you could get him very late. 372,000 midfielder. No one's picking him, right? The only way you would pick him is that you pick him late in the draft, hope he gets the defender status, and then that way, hopefully, he gets that 90 plus averaging role again. It's like kind of like a little free shot, and you'll know in the first 3 to 4 rounds if he's playing defense, and if he's not, then just move him on. Easy as that. Super easy. I did the same, I think, yesterday. It was so what was it? Luke McDonald went from someone else, but I got like a Billings who's meant to be playing forward. I think Sloane's even looking at playing forward. So a few of these other players, and if you get them late enough, if they play midfield, they'll still do all right. But you can also move them on, which is the perfect thing about draft. So let's go on the rookies that we're looking at, Swizz, and we'll round it out pretty quick. First one is for me is Charlie Coombin. He's a 123k forward ruck that I'm kind of looking at. Now, the news is that he was flying, added considerable muscle, hasn't missed a session yet this preseason, and was training with defense and forward groups. So I know he's a forward ruck, but he's someone that could actually be playing defense or playing forward. It's just about that scoring potential that I want to see a little bit more of at the moment. What do you think quickly?
Yeah, well, I think they've got a bit of a trying to work out where he best fits in because they clearly want to play him. The problem with North, because they still got Goldstein, who probably plays one more year, maybe two, the way he's sort of going. They've brought in CCJ over from Richmond, but the one that a few people forget, they also got Edwards in last year in the preseason draft, which was the mid year draft, which was their
Mid-year.
number one pick, and this kid was going to be rated in the first round if they held off. And the club got him this year, so he's a forward ruck as well. So it's trying to okay, how do we bring all these guys in? And North have already got some key forwards down there. So how do you fit all these tools in that they've recruited over the last couple of years? So I think Comden, now they're trying to look at, okay, can we get him maybe into the back line? The only issue is they've actually picked up
Probably.
Aiden Core, who didn't play last year as well, and trying to fit him in. So they've got some tools there, North, and it's like trying to balance it out because they want to get some of the games into this talent.
Unless he's kind of like a third tall. I guess you got McKay as well, Core, and then maybe if he's a third one back, and then you have your your Zeebles and your Halls and your McDonald's or something kind of on the back line. They did lose Tarrant as well, so that kind of does help a little bit. Yeah, you're right though. It's going to be an interesting setup there. Or
Yeah,
again, at
because they're
worst, he could actually be even bloody subvest, mate. Like, hey, no worries, we've got an injury. Awesome, you're going into defense. We have an injury. Awesome, you're going forward line. Hey, we have an injury to the ruck. Awesome, you're going in the ruck. Like, it could be the sellies of all players.
Yeah, and it's like usually they like the small for the subfest, but some clubs do it sometimes and put the tall there. But they've already got Larkey down the forward line. We know Stephenson's going to play some time down there, if not a lot more time, with all these midfielders in there. And then, as we said, they've brought in CCJ as it is, so that's kind of that forward line setup. So, and if they try to get Jack Edwards in there as well at some point, well, where does Comben fit in? Or Comben fit in? So it's
Yep,
as you said, it's going to be an interesting one with him.
it is, and I'm definitely big on Edwards as well. They did say, yeah, first round draft pick. They got him early. It was like a little bit of a project player. Like he had that much potential, and it looked like he was going to go early in this year's draft. So like, wonderful, we'll just get him now and kind of work with him. So I'm waiting to see aesthetically. I think as well. We're looking between these ones. The last two, Goda, you kind of mentioned already, 117k mid, was training as a defender, I believe. I'm not too sure on that. Was
Yep.
impressive in the trial game though, Swizz.
Yeah, coming off half back. So I think once Hall went down as well, there was actually talk about him when he during his sort of the rookie year last year that he could be one of those guys who could play early, just because his body shape.
Yep.
So do I think he's a good possibility now with that North injury with Hall? Yes. 190 centimeters, already 80 kilograms. the big bodies are always the ones that come in early and can do a job because they've already developed out. And that's why I thought Goda was a big chance of playing. The only issue with him being a call to cannon, hasn't seen a lot of footy over the last 2 years, but clearly he's put the work in without playing the actual games. And yeah, he seemed to fit in very well down at half back.
Poor Will Gould is going, mate, my body's ready. I
I
was
know.
drafted and I haven't
Oh,
got a fucking game. I've
that's
done
right.
everything you've asked.
Yeah.
Next
Well,
one is
hopefully
Jason
he
Hall
doesn't become
Francis.
that. Well, yeah, he
Yeah.
should have been number one on the list. And that the
Oh,
first
no, I
interesting
know.
thing with
We've got to
him,
finish
yeah, we
strong,
do.
mate. Jason Hall
The
and
guy.
Francis now, because this one will take a minute. 207,000. Predominantly played. So they drafted him predominantly as a forward with some odd midfield stints. He warmed into the trial game though. He didn't really set the world alight to start with. And the issue I'm going to have is it's okay. Well, they were missing a couple of midfielders out of that mix already because I think they had COVID or due to illness is what they called it. So I'm not too sure. Like I think he's talented enough when you look at he pack marks and he looks like he's got a real X factor to him. But I don't really generally like forwards that are 200,000 starting them in my team, and we see them each year. I can't remember the last time a forward actually was Supercoach relevant at 200,000.
Yeah,
Rookie,
well,
first year.
that is the worry, and we've already named all those midfielders. Firstly, to the 6% of people, I think it is, that have him on their pine at the moment. If you're picking this bloke, he starts on your field in the midfield. You're not paying 207,000 to put somebody on your bench. Swap that now. But I think he's the most selected or second most selected player. Anybody that watched these highlights through that Sandford finals knows how ready-made this guy is, ready to play footy. It's Patrick Dangerfield fives all over again. When Danger was drafted, there was a lot of talk back then, and there's a lot more, obviously, media coverage these days. Ready to go, will kick goals. The problem is it's the North forward line. Like, yeah, I think their young talent's going to improve, and they're going to be a scary team in maybe 2 or 3 years when this talent comes through, if they can keep them all together. But how much forward time, like outside the first 2 weeks, how many goals are they going to be kicking? How much ball is he actually going to see down that forward line? And, Phillips, well, actually, Ben, you were a big call on this about players who are 2, 3, 4 years in the system. And they've got those young guys. We've just talked about Powell. We've talked about LDU. We've talked about Phillips. So they're getting a crack in the midfield before Horn Francis.
Yep.
He's a number 1 draft pick, but they don't need to. We see it with a lot of teams now. Yeah, you want to get your number 1 draft pick out there, but he's a 10 to 15 year investment. You're not throwing him in the first bounce from day one. He's going to probably line up
No.
forward pocket, half
And
forward
even
flank.
Phillips was a very early pick. It was like 2
Yeah,
or 3. I think
exactly.
it was pick 3.
Yep.
And he was a midfielder, barely played, didn't get a very good role. Do you know what I mean? And then it's like, okay, he's like Quadzilla. He's Ollie Wines Jr., I swear to God. He's got massive quads on him and Powell as well. These guys have kind of put in a bit of time. They get first dibs on top of everything else coming out. And then you have a guy who can play forward and then come in and do a role and maybe play his kind of like a Pickett, play your 6 to 8 minutes. Do you know what I mean? In a midfield, in a quarter or whatever. You come in and play a couple of bits and pieces. But for me, when we have a look at their, Horn Francis, okay, midfielder, but forward, probably. Hagen, right, no good. Rowell and Walshy were probably the exception because before that it had been a little while. Rayner obviously wasn't very good first year. McGrath was decent enough. Wiedering, McCartan, Boyd, right, no good first year. Whitfield, I can't remember. Do you know what I mean? But going back a while, so generally the first pick, not so good to start.
Yeah, and
The first
he's
year.
not. He's like, yeah, he's going to become a pure midfielder at some point in his career. But I think it's Petrarca, Dangerfield, Dusty, all those guys where they start their career down. Even Parrish started their career down the forward
Yep.
line. Spent 3, 4 years learning their
Parrish,
craft, developing.
I'd hate to correct you, but Parrish started a midfield.
Well, he had those couple of years there in the friggin' half forward
Supplement.
line where they never
I think it was his
put him
first
in the
year
midfield.
supplement scandal, wasn't it? First year
Yeah,
supplement scandal. Parrish was
actually.
straight in, got banged up and merit.
But
And I
that was
think,
because of different reasons. If they had the full complement, he would have been buddy up
yeah,
in the
no, I
forward
know
line.
that. But again, the only
That's what happens.
exceptions.
That's what happens with these high picks who can play up in the forward line. There's just it's about getting 50 games into him, let him develop his different skills and that, and when the time's right, yeah, he'll be lining up in that first centre bounce. But it's not going to be happening this year.
No, and the only exceptions to scoring for number 1 picks are the ones that are playing pure midfield. Your Rows, your Walshes, Even when we go back, your Mills and stuff was probably the exception, playing, as a high price, was fairly successful. But at 200,000, they really need to average quite well to get to 350. It's just when you look at starting, was it Clark last year? Was it 230 or 250 or 260? I can't remember what he was exactly, but you kind of stagnate with the price because they are expensive. You start dropping 60s and you go nowhere. 60s averages generally kind of plateau, and especially if you're buying them at 207, you really need 70s and 80s consistently, and any low score, which could happen with North, could happen with Youth. It's one of those ones where I'm watching, but he didn't really sell me at the start of the game, so I'm just kind of, again, I'll watch this weekend and see.
Yeah, exactly. And I think those two early games, usually a lot of the time their first game, they kind of just run around against another first gamer and do his thing, but there'll be a bit of pressure on him, so he probably will kick a couple of goals, especially Hawthorn West Coast first up. But then when you start getting the grind and you're playing against Brisbane and you're playing against the Doggies and Geelong, with the way those teams set up their defence and the system that they have, you're not going to have Tommy Stewart letting Buddy Horne-Francis get easy marks and kick goals there. Like the quality of defenders that he'll come up against, and you just naturally get that attention as a first, number one pick. It's not like, pick 12 comes in and that no one's ever heard of, or the opposite where Gota will just sit at the half back line, get a few, cheap possessions because, he's just going to come off their six forward and run around and do his thing. But Horne-Francis, everybody's going to know about him. No different to when Jack Watts debuted. The attention he got when he finally, came on and played against the Pies, they just gave it to him. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on this kid. Now, I think he's up to it and he'll be a good player, but don't expect, Raul Walsh kind of stats out of him first year.
No, I agree. And for that, it's a watch and see at this point in time. And you're right, though. As you bigger boys, they start putting blocks on and all kinds of stuff, and it's going to be a bit of adjusting that first player's kind of need. So I think he's definitely still best 22. So I guess we'll see how we go. And that pretty much rounds us out.
Did you? So Benny, do you have him in?
I have, and then now I faded him for, I think, Ward. And then now I might have him in again. It's just, there's not much in there at the moment that excites me. I've definitely got Dacos. Stevenson kind of impressed enough that I'm kind of watching him again this weekend. So it's really going to be this week based on and naming, obviously. But
it's Ward versus Horne-Francis for me for that spot.
And both weren't that exceptional. And Horne-Francis probably beat Ward. So it's like, I don't know. We'll see. Another week, another data.
Yeah, well, that's right. And then probably Hobbs comes out and dominates again, and I'll be like, fuck, now I've got a real decision on my hands. But yeah, at the moment, I think it's Horne-Francis, Ward, and then Stevens, Hobbs.
Hobbs only got a late showing though, so
yeah, but he looked good in that one quarter that he got in. But at the same time, they're more deep in for the position. And I know a lot of people say North Melbourne because they're bottom. They're going to play some of these rookies, but we've gone through the reasons why where Ward has more of a chance to get that extra midfield time because the Hawks, are sort of crying out for that little bit more dash coming out, a bit more skill to complement Tom Mitchell and Warple.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Time will tell.
That rounds us out for North Melbourne, everyone. That's 30 minutes longer than we thought. Because
we talked about Richmond half of it.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, speaking of Richmond, we'll probably get up to them very soon. But look, until next time, please do like, subscribe, tell us what you think. Let us know who you're keeping your eye on, and if there is a reason why we should definitely be starting Horne-Francis, let us know. Sell us to sell you. And until next time, we'll catch you soon.
Bye.
Bye.